joining us today. Feliz Cinco de Mayo. We hope you are all staying healthy and safe. Please remember that the Facial Pain Association is open remotely for business. You can email us, you can call us, and we are going to continue to provide programs, information, and support. Some of our methods have changed for the time being, but we are thrilled to offer events like these. We also now have virtual support groups. We have one for caregivers, one for parents of children or young adults with facial pain, and one that is open to everyone. Information about these free meetings is on this Facebook page, and you can also email info@tna-support.org with any questions, or if you want to request another type of virtual support group. We have a webinar scheduled for Wednesday, May 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time titled Getting the Brain to Stop, Neuromodulation, What is it, Why do it, and When? Neuromodulation is the way to control pain by delivering low-power electrical signals directly to the nerves or brain through an implanted or external device without producing any irreversible injury to the nervous system. I hope you will join us for that webinar. If you are not receiving our bi-weekly bulletin emails, which contain articles about neuropathic facial pain and notifications about webinars and Facebook Lives and other programs, please email info@tna-support.org and ask to be added to that email list. Finally, in addition to today being Cinco de Mayo, it is also Giving Tuesday now, a global day of unity created in response to the unprecedented need caused by COVID-19. We hope you will consider making a gift to the Facial Pain Association today. Simply click the donate link on this page to support FPA. FPA depends on gifts from generous donors like you, especially during trying times like these. You make it possible for us to continue offering programs such as these, and we are most grateful for your help. And now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce today's presenters. We've got Ann Simnecki and Dr. Jeffrey Fogel. They are both members of our board of directors, and they're going to talk with you about their experience with medical marijuana. And then they will also be answering your questions. So feel free to type your question when you think of something, and then we'll come back to those. So first, let me turn to you, Anne. I was wondering if you could tell everyone a bit about your history with facial pain and how you came to discover medical marijuana.
Well, thank you. I'd be happy to. Many of you know me. For those that don't, I am a third-generation patient with facial pain. My mother had it, and so did my grandmother. And I swear my grandmother used medical marijuana because she smoked one cigarette a day, and it never came out of a pack. It came out of a little gold case that she had. And she grew plants in her garden that the police once came and took away. I was young, so I didn't know what they were, but now I know. So I think that really helped her. It took me 11 years to get a good diagnosis because my pain was more on the atypical or type 2 side. It didn't have the flashing pain, the lancinating pain that most people that have a compression do have. It turned out that I did have a vascular compression. I had one MVD, I had a gamma knife, and then I had another MVD, and I am mostly out of pain except when seasons change. And my pain gets really bad. I have flares almost every day. And right now I take some medication for some nerve damage that was done during the surgeries. So it's a neuropathy. So I take Lyrica and Zymbalta, small amounts, but they're the amounts that I can tolerate. And when I have flare-ups and I have to take more to control the pain, I can't function. And I babysit every day. I do a lot of volunteer work. I can't not be me on a daily basis. So I read a lot about medical marijuana. In fact, I wrote one of the articles that was in the Quarterly recently, and I listened to Jeff a lot and read his articles, and he's kind of my marijuana mentor, whether he knows it or not. So I decided it was worth giving it a try, and it worked wonderfully for me when I started. In fact, I had days when I was using it that I was in no pain at all. I mean, not even that little bit of background pain that I used to tolerate, nothing at all. So I continued like that. And I realized that my mouth was dry. I was getting some of the side effects from the combinations of drugs. And I talked to Dr. Hare, who's an oral facial pain specialist and my doctor. And he said that I could probably start cutting back on some of the prescription medication that he prescribed. So I cut back half over time. One change every 3 weeks is his rule. So one dose or one small amount of pill. I cut back half of the Lyrica and I was fine. There was no difference at all. And then I started cutting back the Cymbalta. I was taking 60 milligrams a day. I cut back to 40 and I was fine. And I cut a little bit more to try to get to half to 30 and things just fell apart. So now I'm working my way up. I'm back on 40 milligrams. I might go back to 50. We'll just have to see what happens, but it's up a little bit up in the air now, but it's definitely improved and I don't have the side effects from the medication, which there are many. You have no libido, you're constipated, you're bloated all the time. It's very unpleasant. And those unpleasant side effects from all of the medication I was taking are gone now. And I don't really get side effects from the marijuana except dry mouth in the morning. So that's my story.
And Jeff, can you tell us now your story? I have so many questions for you already, Ann, but Jeff, we want to hear your background with medical marijuana.
Okay, I got diagnosed about 8 to 10 years ago. I had symptoms similar to most everybody else for probably 5 to 10 years that was undiagnosed, treated for sinus infections, root canals, all the like. After I got diagnosed, I ultimately had one MVD and then a second MVD because the first MVD worked for about 2 or 3 years. And then I ended up having the second one. And I get type 1 and type 2, I guess you call it. And I primarily now have the glossopharyngeal with a lot of pain in my eardrum and very sensitive to wind. My first experience with medical marijuana, being a physician, we're all kind of taught that, marijuana is illegal, don't use it. And that's what the medical establishment teaches. But one day I had somebody who lived in New Jersey at the time where it was already legal. I'm in Pennsylvania. And he had me try, one of his preparations. And I was in tremendous pain. I took about, 5 or 6 tokes on it. And within 10 minutes, I just turned to my wife and I said, it's gone. It's just absolutely gone. And the only thing that was working for me before was morphine, but that made me, unable to sleep, be scratching all night, double vision, throwing up. I hated taking it. The next day I felt whiffy all day. So I would do anything I could not to take it. And with the marijuana, I couldn't believe how quickly and how completely it worked. Now, it took some trial and error to find out the right mixture that I needed. And in that process of doing that, I did a whole lot of research. And that's why, the second edition, where I piggybacked on Ann's edition of the quarterly back last summer, I tried to relay all the information that I have attained over time in terms of, why marijuana is illegal, what the different formulations are, the best way to take it, many of the basically what I would call nuts and bolts of taking it. And to me, it's been a godsend when I'm in pain. Works like no other medication at all. So that's why I try and pass that information on to others.
Yeah, and so for anybody out there, what Ann and Jeff have referred to a few times is that they each have authored an article for the Facial Pain Association's quarterly journal. So if you're interested in reading those articles, they are incredibly thorough. There's lots of information on there. So if you're interested in getting your hands on those articles, you can contact us at FBA. We'll be happy to send you the links to those. So I'm trying to get to some things that maybe aren't in the articles. Anne, I know that you're more recent coming to, how long has it been now with medical marijuana?
I started on January 9th.
And Jeff, how about you?
I started, it became legal in Pennsylvania I think 2 years ago and 2 months ago. So I started 2 years and 2 months ago.
So let me ask like the obvious question, which is people tuning into this broadcast maybe didn't get what they expected to see when we were hearing about people's experience with medical marijuana, which is not to teenage kids. Maybe you were children of the 60s or 70s, but you're certainly not, youngsters. So did you have to overcome any of your own ideas about the stigma of marijuana for yourself or for your family or your colleagues or anything like that?
Well, in terms of my colleagues, yes, but I didn't really tell them that I was taking it. As you mentioned, I am a product of the 60s, so I didn't have any personal stigma, but I did have an issue with the fact that, I had told my sons all these years when they were growing up, that it was a illegal drug and they shouldn't be taking it. And then here I am 10, 15 years later taking it. So that was a little bit of a eye-opening experience to them.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I never used marijuana when I was in high school or college. I graduated college in 73, so I was right in the midst of that free love hippie era. But the only flack I got was from my two boys. So, they were in a teasing kind of way, but I know they were concerned about it.
So both of you, Jeff, as you mentioned, you're in Pennsylvania and you're in New Jersey. If I'm correct, both of those states, it's legal to take marijuana medicinally, but not recreationally. So what was your actual experience from the time you talked to your doctor about taking marijuana to actually getting the product?
Well, Anne, you want to go first because New Jersey had it before Pennsylvania.
Sure. So in New Jersey, you have to get a recommendation from somebody who's legally able to prescribe marijuana, and there are only certain conditions for which you can get it. So there's a list on the state website of doctors that you can go to get one of these recommendations. None of my doctors was on that list, and I see a few. I mean, it could have been my PC and not my oral facial pain doctor, but nobody that I knew was on that list. So I found a place. It was a pain management center, and they used to be in Cranberry, which would have been very convenient, but they moved to Mount Laurel. And I went there, and if you went with a diagnosis in hand, they would just make the recommendation for you. If you did not have a diagnosis, you would have to see them at least 4 times, spaced a few weeks apart, and they would determine whether you fell into one of the eligible categories to get the marijuana. Now, it wasn't cheap. It was $400 out of pocket to bring in my diagnoses. I had 2 of them. And it was simple. I mean, all it was a report from the doctor's office that showed the ICD-9 code she billed. And there's a code for trigeminal neuralgia. Once I had that, I was fine. I also got a recommendation from Dr. Hare, who wrote a letter saying what I had and that he thought I'd benefit from marijuana. So I had 2 good recommendations. I cheerfully paid my $400. I got my picture taken. Whoops, where is it? And you get in the mail. Oh, so you get this recommendation. You get the recommendation. You go on a website once you're approved, and you have to apply for a medical marijuana card. So I applied. That cost is $100 unless you're
Hold it
senior.
up a little bit. Hold it up a little.
That is okay. So it looks
Yep.
like it looks like a driver's license. That costs $100 unless you're a senior citizen, and if you're a senior citizen, it's only $20. So you got a little bit of a bargain. You need to go back and get that renewed in 3 months, and that cost is $100 for a 6-month renewal or $200 for a year renewal. So if you're looking for a business to go into, that's it. It's like easy money for them.
It sounds like they're throwing up either some barriers, or it's just there's kind of money, schemes at each step of the way. Did you find that was a hurdle? Did that dissuade you at all? Did at any point you go, you know what, this is just too many barriers, I'm just gonna forget about it?
No, the money didn't bother me because, sometimes I say to myself, what would you pay to be out of pain? And it's, for me, that it's a lot. So I just figured, a couple pairs of shoes, I don't know what the equivalent of that would be, but it was well worth it. Then before you can actually you go to a dispensary, and before you can actually get the marijuana, you have to meet with one of their health counselors. And their health counselor is a young guy who's like almost your grandson, and he goes over their products with you. So you get a page like this that shows all the different products that they have, and on the back it's all the different forms you can get it in, and he tells you which products are recommended for what kind of pain and what different forms you can take, and he makes recommendations which you do or you do not have to follow. um, they never ask your diagnosis. They just kind of go by your symptoms. And I was very lucky because I said I had trigeminal neuralgia, and my health counselor had been treating someone else with trigeminal neuralgia and told me what was working for him. And it actually wasn't one of the things recommended for neurological pain, but I tried it anyway and it worked. So
I'm sorry, Ann. So somebody is actually asking for Jeff, but also for if you would like to answer this question specifically, what type of marijuana, what specific recommendation, what type you found is helpful for you?
Okay, I've tried a few kinds, and I like something that's called Sage 20. And that is my daytime marijuana. And then I take another form that is more of a nighttime form. So that I always get these mixed up. Help me, Jeff.
Indica, like indica couch.
There's indica and sativa.
Right.
Okay.
So I always remember indica means into couch if you take it. You just
okay. So I take indica at night, and I vape during the day if I get a flare. So if the indica is a tincture like this, it comes in a little bottle, looks like some makeup that oil you'd spread on your face at night, and there's a dropper, and it's marked, and I take.
Hold it up a little bit more. There you go.
And just slip it under your tongue at night. And it takes about an hour to work, but it does make me nice and sleepy. I sleep well. And
how many drops of that do you do?
5.
Do you know what the dosage is about?
Yes, it's 50 milligrams
total.
I'm sorry, 0.5 milliliters. So, half a dropper full, 5 drops. And there's 35 doses in this thing. So this lasts about a month.
So you said that's 50 milligrams you take at night?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know what the dosage is on the one you take during the day?
The one I take during the day, I really don't have a good feel for the dosage because I vape during the day. So I have a pen like this, and I take a puff. One puff is usually enough. And if it's not, in a few minutes later, I take another puff. Now, the marijuana here, I'm going to do a show and tell.
Hold it up a little bit.
Okay. It comes in a package like this. So it tells you, this is my Sage 20. And you open it up, and you take it out, and it comes in a little thing like this. You open this up, you get somebody to open it for you. And this is a ceramic mouthpiece, and you can see the golden
Hold it up a little bit more. Yeah, that's perfect. Good.
The golden colored liquid, and here's the marijuana itself.
Okay.
So you take it out of this little doohickey. It's really very tight, I guess, to keep it fresh. And take the mouthpiece and you just screw it in the pen and you're ready to go. Now, there are different kinds of pens. This one is one of my favorites. It's from a company called Candy Pens. And you actually have to turn this one on. And you turn it on by pressing the button 5 times. Then you can adjust the temperature at which the marijuana gets heated. And I find that the lower the temp is, the better it works for me. So this pen costs about $35. If you want to go a little bit cheaper route, and this is what I suggest you do at first because you don't know if vaping is really going to work for you, this is a pen that you get from the dispensary.
Hold it up a little bit. I can't see it.
And this one costs only $7. There's no temperature setting on this. There's no turning it on and off. You just inhale, and the inhalation heats or activates the heat and the marijuana. But I find that this can get awfully hot, and it actually hurts my throat and ears. Mm-hmm. So I carry this in my purse in case I need it for an emergency while I'm out. But this is the one I use during the day. And both of these you need to charge, and they're just simple USB chargers like you would use for your phone.
That's really helpful. Jeff, what people are asking, what kind do you use specifically?
All right. Well, first of all, just to step back a bit, as Ann was mentioning what goes on in New Jersey, every state that has allowed medical marijuana has different rules, different criteria that you have to meet and all that. So again, if we refer back to, and I don't know if you can see this, the quarterly issue, in there is a table which has every different state that has it legalized and the website in that state that you can go on and find out what the exact specifics are in your state. Now, to answer the question about what I use, what I found, my preference is that when I'm in pain, I just want to go to sleep. So I take an indica based product, and it also has in it melatonin, and it just knocks me out. And that's exactly the effect I want, because I'm not going to drive or do anything else. So if I'm going to be home, might as well just be knocked out. And, you know, typically what happens is I'll take it and I'll fall asleep. And then the next morning I wake up fine. And I only take it for, unlike Ann, who takes a form every day, I only take it when I'm having an acute flare. So I can get away with, you know, sleeping it off. Whereas if I was taking it every day, that wouldn't work for me or probably for anybody else.
One of our,
like Ann does at night.
One of our support groups had a man speak this weekend, and he called himself a medical marijuana coach. And what he talked about was taking medical marijuana just as though you're taking any other medication, meaning that you take a set dosage every day. So and that sounds more like what you're doing, but it also kind of sounds like you go by how you're feeling that day, but you take it more on a consistent basis, right?
Well, I do take the tincture every single day. It's kind of substituted for the Lyrica. And the vape, and that takes, like I said, an hour to work. It makes me sleepy. It's almost the same as what Jeff described, but I think it's a lower dose. When I have a flare during the day, and I do sometimes, then I'll use the vaping, because the vaping is immediate. It's like 5 minutes, you feel better. And sometimes you have to do 2 or 3, but never more than that. And they're just tiny little puffs, and that helps me. So I'm doing a combination. And I should also say that this pen that I showed you, this little top piece, this is also supposed to have 35 doses. And this, one of these lasts me 2 months. So I don't use that much of it. And I don't think I take a full dose. I think I take a tiny little puff at low heat, so I'm not going through it real fast. And it does last a long time. So it for me, that's what works. So to answer the question, it's a combination. I use the tincture every single night at the same time, the same amount, and this as needed during the day. And I
Okay.
don't, and I should also say that I treat this like a medication. It stays in my bathroom. I don't vape while I'm watching TV or reading a book or knitting or doing anything casual. I don't do it in front of the children. I, the grandchildren. It's a medicine, and I treat it like one.
Yeah, you treat it like one. And does the well, $64,000 question, do you get high? Are you like, are you sitting and giggling? Are you high when you first start doing it and then your body adapts to it? What's the experience like?
You want me?
Review.
Well,
Okay. What
Jeff, you go
happened?
first, and then I'll go.
Okay. Typically, what happens is and again, this is going to depend upon what ratio you have in your product of THC to CBD, as well as what the absolute number of milligrams are in your product, so the concentration. But when you start off, the THC, which is the psychoactive one, will make you feel high if you're taking the sativa. Over time, your body gets used to that effect, and you don't get that high feeling, but you do get the pain relief. And the difference between the pain relief from marijuana versus the pain relief from opioids is, with opioids, you still have the pain, but you don't care about it. With the marijuana, the pain is I couldn't believe it. The pain is truly just gone.
And is that your experience too?
I think since January I've been high once, and it was at the very beginning when I was using too much. I mean, I sort of realized that it just didn't take that much to make the pain go away. And you don't want to waste it, so you take as like any medicine, you take as little as you need.
This is a big point for me because honestly, until I heard that presentation over the weekend, it really just didn't occur to me. I figured you take medical marijuana, it gets you high and you feel better, to be quite honest. And so what I didn't realize is that people are not taking it to get high. They're taking it because it's the medical benefit that really is helping reduce their pain, but that the high is not there. And, or if it is, like Jeff, you said, your body, I don't know what your word was, you adapt to it or your body acclimates to it or whatever. And it's really just the pain reliever. So that was a big surprise for me. I think a lot of other people would be surprised to hear that as well.
Right. And again, there's all different formulations. The one that I initially had from that gentleman in New Jersey, he had an issue. His mouth was so painful that he couldn't eat, and he was down to, like, I don't know, 80 pounds. So the formulation that he had was not only gave you the high, but it also increased his appetite because they wanted him to gain weight back. And it was very successful in doing that. But the first time I took it when I was in pain, I didn't know all that, so I probably took more than I should, and I was like a madman trying to get stuff to eat, and I gained over 2 pounds just that night, eating a half a gallon of ice cream and a whole cheesecake, and anything I could get my hands on, I was eating.
I think
So,
we all can relate to that at the moment. But it sounds like, kind of trite, but really it's not, because Anne, as you and I have talked about, a lot of the medications that facial pain patients take also have the side effect of pain. So people are going to be concerned. And, I think that's something to think about.
And that's why there are, so many products. I mean, when people say marijuana, I mean, there's over 400 different chemical compounds in marijuana, 60 different types of cannabinoids. I mean, the ones that get all the publicity are THC and CBD, but there are so many in there. And in addition to all the, the terpenes and all that, there are so many products that they can tailor a product that is best for you. For example, he had the one that increased his appetite. I have the one that favors sleep. And they can so fine tune it. And we didn't get to talk about, the experiences in Pennsylvania, but it's vastly different. Even though it's a medical marijuana program, it's vastly different than the stuff in New Jersey. And I didn't know about many of the things that Ann said about New Jersey until just now.
It would be very interesting, I think, to hear people in all the different states and the states where it's available recreationally, because we were talking about that and how different that experience seems. I have a couple of questions specifically I want to get to because they came in a while ago. Anne, can you confirm what you said about the cost of, was it $35 just for the pen?
Yeah, the pen. It's the pen that I like. The candy pen was $35. And they actually sent me an extra pen when I ordered it, so that was nice. And the pen that you can get at the dispensary that doesn't have any controls on it is $7.
So the pen without the marijuana was $35, but that's because you like the way that it
Yes, and
works.
you use it over and over again. I mean, it's not like it's a one time purchase.
Okay. And Jeff, did you tell us which brand or what kind, do you know what kind of marijuana you take specifically?
Yes, but again, the names do not mean anything because from state to state, they're all different products.
They give
For
them different
example,
names.
in Pennsylvania, you can only get products that were grown and processed in Pennsylvania.
Really?
So, yes, so that there is no national product. So, for example, this is the Lemon G, which you may or may not, unless you get it from Terrapin, which is the company that makes this, and they do have locations in other states. You're not going to get that. And here is the tincture that I use, which is Alera.
Can you hold that up to where we are? A little closer.
That?
My close up, Mr. DeMille. Okay. Okay, good. Okay.
That's Alera is the brand name. Soothe is the name of that tincture. So the names don't matter. What you have to really look at is as I mentioned, the ratios and all that, and what's in the products. In Pennsylvania, you can't get a pen for $7. The cheapest I think is $50. So again, every state is totally different.
But when Anne said the pen was $7, I think she meant the pen without marijuana in it.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
Correct.
Oh, and in Pennsylvania, they cost $50 just to buy the pen itself.
The pen, I don't think they sell it without the marijuana, but even if it is, it's still more than that. That's why, when I did it, I made a decision not to do the pen. That's why this one is the whole flower. So it looks like that. That's the female flower.
And you smoke that?
I smoke that.
And do you know what your dosage is, or can you guess?
Well, on this one, it is. It's about a 1-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD. It's 11% THC and 8.19% CBD. So it's just about 1-to-1. And then the number of milligrams is, I'd have to get it for you here. I can't tell you, but it's the number of milligrams is the amount that you're ultimately getting in. And I generally, when I do that, generally take about 4 puffs through a device that those of us from the 60s call a bong, which my daughter-in-law got this for me because she's from California and everything illegal out there.
Somebody asked Jeff.
Oh, can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
On the back of the product that you get, it tells you the ratio.
Yes.
So this Sage 20 that I like, it tells me here that the potency is 77.4% THC. So they express them differently in different places too. And that there's 350 milligrams of THC total in this package, and that a dose is 10 milligrams. But I know that when I took the 10 milligrams, That's when I was feeling high, so I do less now.
See, I think
Right
this
now.
is really important. Go ahead, Jeff.
And on my tincture is a 5-to-1 THC to CBD, and the percentage of THC in there is 0.423%, CBD being 0.076. So that's the 5-to-1 ratio. The concentration of THC and CBD together is 4.9 milligrams per ml. So basically 5 milligrams per an ml. And as Anne was mentioning, she takes half of an ml. So therefore I'm getting 2.5 milligrams in a dose of a half of an ml, which is about there.
Yeah.
So
It sounds confusing to hear you talk about ratios and mLs and things like that. So, but would your takeaway be that you do have to maybe start with something, try it, see what you like about it, what you don't, and then it's sort of a what's the term? Is kind of like a, you know, you take
trial.
and then
You
trial and error,
you
right?
have to the overriding, take home message here is that if you are going to use it, you should always start low and work your way up in terms of number of milligrams. And you should also generally start with a product that has a higher CBD to THC ratio. And that way you won't feel as stoned. So those are the two basic points. And then you have to decide which plant do you want. Do you want sativa or indica? They also make now a hybrid plant, which has the benefits of both, but not the side effects as much of both. So all those things have to factor in. And then as you try a product, you say, well, that worked a little bit for my pain. I'm gonna go to something that's a higher THC to CBD, 1-to-1, a 5-to-1, realizing that it's the THC that works for the pain relief. CBD alone does not do anything for pain. It needs to be combined with the THC to have what's called a synergistic effect for it to be able to work. So that's why you have to do trial and error to find out what works for you. And generally when people say, oh, I tried marijuana and it didn't work for me, it's like people who, drive a Pontiac and say, I'm never going to drive a car again because I didn't like it. You have to try another one. There's so many out there. In Pennsylvania, going back to what Ann was saying, once you get the recommendation from a physician, you go to the dispensary, and you get the card. In Pennsylvania, the card is only $50, and that's per year. And once you get the card, you go into the dispensary, you meet with a licensed pharmacist. They're required to have a pharmacist on hand at all times. So you make an appointment, and they spend between 30 and 60 minutes with you, finding out what other medications you're on, what you're looking at, going over the different formulations, smoking, ingesting it, gummies, elixirs. I mean, there's all different kinds that you can do. We can get into that if we have time. So it's a very professionally done process in Pennsylvania. And then you can keep working with the pharmacist to titrate until you get to the preparation that works for you in terms of pain relief without side effects.
I want to ask a few more questions, and I would love to, if we can, talk about the different delivery methods. Somebody asked you specifically, Jeff, but Anne, you can answer this question also. I want to read the way they asked it because it was good. It was something about, would you have had an MVD if you could have taken marijuana and known how it could help you?
Yeah, if I
Something
was
to that effect. I'm paraphrasing.
The answer is absolutely yes, because I would not have been able to be still at that point still practicing, being on the marijuana every day. I wouldn't, in that way, by using the marijuana, you're using it for pain control and relief. The purpose of the MVD was to eliminate the source of the pain. So I would have done the first MVD and the second MVD exactly, the way I did, um, and then using the marijuana for the breakthrough pain.
And
Yeah,
Anne,
and,
you
and
as well.
one of the things you learn over the years with trigeminal neuralgia is there is no magic bullet. It takes a lot of different things to help. So I would have definitely had the MVD because I was looking to make this not part of my life. And when the pain came back again, it came back strong. So I had a second MVD at Gamma Knife because it came back in a different place. It was occipital. But just like the marijuana won't substitute for your other medications, it's an add-on, it's adjunct. And every little thing you do helps. I mean, right now I feel like I'm in more pain since I've been isolated than I've been in a long time, and I'm realizing it's because I'm not going to acupuncture the way I used to. The acupuncturist has closed down temporarily, so it takes a little bit of everything to make this work. And marijuana is just one more. I hate to use violent analogies, but it's just one more weapon in the arsenal.
I
Yeah.
You
like
could
I
try.
like to think of it that the MVD is a chance for a cure,
Right.
whereas the marijuana is a treatment. And so there's a big difference. Do you want to keep treating it, or do you want to have the potential for a cure? And there's many people who've had MVDs and then don't have any pain after that at all. Not everybody, but there are, a decent number. So that to me is the difference. You don't want to equate one with the other at all.
And if
And
you look at the pharmaceutical studies, and you look at the first line of attack for this is the anti-seizure drugs, followed by the antidepressants, followed by muscle relaxers, followed by marijuana. So it's a fourth line of treatment to be used after all the others and with the others if you find one that works.
um, mentioning that, what was the reaction of your doctors? Were they dismissive of you trying it? Were they encouraging? Were they helpful?
Well, I'm in a little bit different situation than probably Ann is and others. I was involved right from the beginning in Pennsylvania in terms of crafting the legislation, so that when I walked into my doctor's office, I had so much more information about it than they did. I was the one who put in the line about one of the indications being chronic neuropathic pain, unresponsive to other methods. So when I came into their office, they knew I knew more about it than they did, so they kind of were differential to me and said, tell us about it, and I did. Whereas I think that the layperson, they might have had a different response to.
But you, Anne, experience with your doctors?
It's taken me a long time to find doctors I really like and who work and play well together in treating this. And as a result, they were both very supportive.
That's great.
And that's another thing. I mean, you really have to find doctors that will work and play well together and be willing to talk to each other and talk to you about this. And if you do that, you're much better off than going to a doctor who's not going to believe you and not going to suggest you try other things to get yourself out of pain.
Now, Ann, is it in New Jersey? Is it like in Pennsylvania where they only have certain physicians who are approved by the program?
Yes, and neither of mine were. So I had to,
Okay,
that's why I ended up in this very expensive pain
right,
center.
right. And we should
What
talk about why it was so expensive to go to the pain center.
I'm not sure, maybe because people are desperate and willing to pay.
No, actually not. Insurance is not allowed to cover this treatment because on the federal level it's illegal. So everything has to be in cash. The dispensaries have to be in cash. Banks are not allowed to touch the money because it's money laundering, and they would suffer federal penalties. So that's why the whole process is fairly expensive and totally out-of-pocket cash, unreimbursable.
That's
so
correct.
let's talk a little bit about the different delivery methods. You've already talked about vaping and smoking and tinctures. Can you give me a little bit of the pros and cons? And I know we're missing a few people are mentioning lozenges. Are those considered edibles? I don't know if you know that, but talk about those and edibles a little bit, or if they're, I don't know what I'm missing.
Okay.
An expert.
All right. There's a number of delivery methods, and if you think you have different categories. So the first category would be inhalation. If you want fast relief, inhalation is the way to go. Now, in that category of inhalation, there's two methods. There's smoking and there's vaping. And each of them have their pros and cons. In terms of amount of product that's inhaled, with vaping, you get about 90% of the THC recovered and 10% of the byproducts. With smoking, you get about 10% of the THC and 90% of the byproducts. So vaping is a much more efficient method to do. So if you need an immediate response, that's the way to go. The next group is the tinctures, and those are things under the tongue. They are absorbed, through the mucous membranes. They work slower. They work, 45 minutes to an hour before the dose kicks in. But unlike, the smoking, the effect lasts longer. Inhalation, the effect might be gone in an hour, whereas with the tinctures, it can last 6-8 hours. But it's much more difficult. One of the cons is it's difficult to figure out what dosage is working for you, because you can't say after 5 minutes, oh, I'm still in pain, I'm going to take another dose. Since it takes about 45 minutes or an hour to get an effect, you really have to wait about 2 hours before you take another dose if you find the first dose isn't working. With inhalation, you can take another dose in 5 minutes if the first one isn't working. Then you go to ingestion, which is the third category, and that's the gummies, that's the brownies, all those things, the edibles. They take even longer to get an effect. They can take several hours to get an effect. Again, though, their effect lasts longer, so it can be 8 to 12 hours. And that's really, really difficult to titrate a dose with, because, again, you're going to have to wait, 6 hours to see if it's helping you. That's too long then to take another dose, because the peak doesn't go up like this. It kind of goes like this. So that's the pros and cons. Now, if you have any lung function issues, asthma, COPD, then you don't want to use any of the inhalation methods. If you have any GI motility issues, then you don't want to use the ingestion methods. So there are different reasons to use or not to use one product or the other.
And can I just say that New Jersey does not have edibles? They do have lozenges, but they don't have gummy bears or brownies or things like that to buy.
Okay. Yeah, neither does Pennsylvania, but a number of states do.
Right.
And some people I know do make their own capsules and can make their own edibles, and that might be the expert. We're doing beginners level tonight, but that might be the.
We'll have a cooking class.
Um, and I wanted to talk to you about something that's really important, and you and I have talked about before, which is travel and what you do when you're going, when you're flying or even going interstate with your medical marijuana.
Well, if I'm going by car, I just stick it like I visit my son sometimes who lives on Long Island. I just put it in my suitcase and take it with me because I don't think anybody's going to inspect my car when I cross the line from New Jersey to New York. I did go to one of the board meetings in Florida right after I started. It was February 1st, and I was really afraid to take it with me. So I kind of put some of the lozenges that I had in my purse in a little candy holder. And I used them when I was there, and I really did miss my regular products. And I think if I had to travel next time, I would just stick them somewhere and take them with me, even though it is illegal, and just take the chance of getting caught. It if I mean, I think the only way you'd get caught is if TSA finds it in your bag when they're inspecting it. And if they find it, they are obligated to report it. It's the rule. And then they back out and you deal with the state police about it.
Right. The TSA is not allowed to make a determination that you have a medical marijuana card, therefore you can pass through. They are not. They are never specifically looking for drugs. They are not the DEA. It's only if they find it in a routine search. So obviously, well, backing up, the first thing is it is illegal federally to cross state lines. Even if you're flying from one state where it's legal, even recreationally legal, if you're going from California to Colorado, both states recreationally is approved, but it is not legal to go between those states because of the federal guidelines. Um, so having said that disclaimer, they're not going to be looking for it. And they've even now trained the drug sniffing dogs to extinguish on the scent of marijuana because it's becoming so prevalent. You have 35 states now where it's legal for medical marijuana, and I believe it's like 15 that it's legal for recreational. So there is no sense anymore for them to be sniffing out marijuana when it's, not, they're not going to get any big fines or people going to jail for 10 years on it. Um, so, but and now internationally, it's a definite taboo to bring marijuana with you. There are all kinds of different rules in different countries, but it's generally not as permissive as it is in the United States. In the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, the fine for having marijuana, having any drugs, is death, and the State Department can't help you out. So I definitely wouldn't fly to Saudi Arabia with any medical marijuana in my baggage in any way.
So noted. It's great information. I want to get back a little bit to your personal experiences. So, and what has using medical marijuana enabled you to do, or what has it really, in general, really done for your quality of life?
It has made the flare-ups less severe. So if I get breakthrough pain, which I call a flare-up, take vaping a little bit makes it go away quickly, and I can just get on with whatever I was doing. And I don't want to be sidelined by this, so it helps me a lot. Now, my grandmother was not, but my mother was very severe. She had bilateral, and she had it in two branches of the nerve on her right hand side. So she had three places, and she I've read somewhere, I don't know if you can confirm this, Jeff, that some people who take Tegretol or who took Tegretol would get Crohn's disease. And she had Crohn's disease in addition to her marijuana. So I grew up in a household with a mother who was always in pain and bedbound much of the time. And she actually starved to death. That's how she died, because between the not being able to eat because of the marijuana, because of the neuralgia, and not being able to digest what she ate because of the Crohn's, she was just debilitated. And I swore that I would not let this happen to me. It's like I'd rather be dead than be in that position. I want to find a way to live my life, and I'm going to move mountains to do it.
Now, Anne, I find it odd that, or not odd, but funny that you said that your grandmother wasn't as affected. I'm
Yeah,
wondering if that's because she was smoking that one cigarette a
probably,
day,
probably,
um,
probably.
and that's why she wasn't as affected.
Yeah. And it's interesting because she didn't have as much choice. There, like they did out what she called alcohol injections, which I think were actually glycerol injections, and her marijuana. And my mother wasn't going to smoke marijuana, and um, she had a few rhizotomies, but there was no MVD. I mean, it was before the time of MVD. In fact, I can remember sitting in a neurosurgeon's office with her, and they were talking about this crazy doctor, or he was talking about this crazy doctor in Pittsburgh who thought he could cure trigeminal neuralgia by going in behind your ear and moving a vein.
Now we all know how that turned out.
I know. And he said, I wouldn't do it. Don't you do it. Don't, it was not good. And she didn't. She opted to have a rhizotomy, which helped, but didn't, I mean, she needed more than she had. I mean,
Yeah.
she had two, one for each
Now,
side, then still had the pain up here.
this program is meant to be on your experiences, and you've both been helped using medical marijuana. Someone has asked a few times about addressing people who it makes the pain worse, and I don't think you each could speak about that because that's not your experience. But I don't know, second hand, have you heard of anyone with marijuana makes it worse? Or Jeff, can you talk to that at all in terms of maybe why that might be?
I never heard of it making anybody worse. What I would guess is happening is it's not making them better, and they're expecting to feel better to get relief, and they're not. And that just tells me that they probably haven't gotten to the right formulation. And that's working, again, if they're in a state that has a good program, working with the people in the know to get something that is ultimately going to work for them. But I've never heard of it increasing pain. And all the research I've done, I've never seen any reports of marijuana actually increasing pain.
Yeah. Now, Jeff,
But
you,
let me say this though, everyone is different. And if you're doing something that's making your pain worse, it's okay to stop. Try
Right.
something else. There are lots of different complementary and alternative things that you can do, and you don't have to stick with one that's not working for you. Try acupuncture, try massage, try upper cervical chiropractic works. I said
Right.
that right. Chiropractic
Right.
works for some people. So just try another modality. There's
Right.
no need
Right.
to
And
force yourself. It's like putting a round peg in a square hole. It doesn't work for you. Move on. Try, maybe work with the pharmacist and the coaches at the dispensary for a little while. Give it your best. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I mean, that,
yeah.
how many medications don't work for people? It's kind of the same.
Can you both just mention, I know we talked about this at the top, Anne and Jeff, both of you, how long have you been suffering with facial pain? And I shouldn't say suffering, I'm sorry. How long?
She's learning. I'm 68 now. Mine started when I was 42.
Okay.
But
and
obviously, facial pain has been part of my life for half a century.
Yeah.
So now, are you saying from the time of diagnosis or from the time of symptom onset?
I
Symptoms
think
on
symptoms on to me means
symptoms.
you're affected by it.
The
Yeah.
symptoms, I'd say 15 to 20 years for symptom onset, and diagnosed about 10 or 11 years ago.
And did either one of you had any health concerns about medical marijuana? Jeff is a retired physician, you know, with just the smoke in your lungs or anything like that. Were either of you concerned about that health detriment of medical marijuana?
Well, again, being a product of the 60s, I was kind of okay with smoking it. And so, no, especially because of the amount that I do. Unlike Anne, I do not need to do it every day. I only do it during a flare. And after my second MVD, I get flares maybe, once every 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And I've gone actually 4 months without a flare until this afternoon. So I've been pretty fortunate. So to me, if I'm going to be taking the product 4 or 5 times a year at most, then I don't have an issue with smoking it. If I was doing it every day, that'd be totally different.
What about you, Anne?
Well, I don't smoke it, and I don't take that much of it, so I wasn't very worried. When you heard about all of the vaping problems that people were having,
Right, right.
I did ask at the dispensary whether I should be vaping, and they explained that some of the vaping comes from what the marijuana is mixed in, particularly vitamin E oil, and they don't use that.
Yeah,
So
I can answer that real easily. That was most of the cases of that were due to the fact of people using non-medical marijuana. Let's leave it at that. Street marijuana. And when they vaped it, what the people were doing when selling the illicit marijuana is it looks like it's a very small amount. So to make it look like it was a bigger volume that people were getting their money's worth, they added in vitamin E oil. And the thought was, well, it's a vitamin, so we can put it in there. It expands the volume and everybody be happy, which is fine. When you heat it up, the vitamin E oil became aerosolized and went in the lungs. The problem was when it gets back to room temperature, it becomes a liquid again. So now you've put oil in your lungs. And so that's what was creating those lung issues. It was oil sitting in there. If you've noticed, since they've cracked down on that and, not and taken out the vitamin E, there really isn't, you don't hear very much about that anymore. So it was just that method of delivery with those products. The medical marijuanas, there were very, very few that added in the vitamin E. So that's why it really wasn't happening with medical marijuana.
Okay.
and I was no more concerned about side effects and health effects from medical marijuana than I was from any of the other drugs I was taking, all of which have side effects.
Right. Well, that's a really good point is, I'm not a doctor, but I always have heard that every medication, right, Jeff?
Mhm.
Take Tylenol, there's a list of potential side effects. So
Right.
And one of the effects is
But
it makes you feel better. So
right.
it's always
if it,
valid. You
And
right.
always, you
it
always,
has the biggest safety profile of any drug known to man. In order to get a lethal overdose, you have to consume, I think it's 15,000 pounds in a 15-minute period. Clearly an unobtainable task. So it's safer than anything you can have out there. I mean, like you mentioned, Tylenol isn't that safe. There is no other product that there has never ever been a lethal overdose.
yeah.
And I
And
think you went into this
let me
in your,
just mention that this little cartridge that you have up here, just to put some realism around Jeff's statement. When this is full, it's 1/8 of an ounce.
Hold it up a little bit. Yeah.
So it's a small amount that goes far.
And I think, Jeff, did you cover this, or did one of you cover this in your articles in the journal about the history of marijuana and why it became a class 1 narcotic and all of that? It's very interesting, really interesting.
Right. Well, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version, and for people who are new, Reader's Digest was a short way of reading a whole book in 15 minutes or less. But in any event, it's been around for thousands and thousands of years, going back to the pharaohs and all that. They were using it. It was prescribed legally in the United States up until the 1930s. The big pharmaceutical companies were producing 60,000 pounds of it a year. And then a gentleman by the name of Anslinger started this whole thing saying that it was basically the devil's brew. It got involved in the mainstream media, and then they were saying it caused criminality. So the federal government taxed the heck out of it, and it stopped being used until 1969, when there was a Supreme Court ruling that said that the taxing of marijuana wasn't legal. And it's because of that the schedule of medications was created. And so it's actually marijuana caused that DEA scheduling process to begin. They didn't know what to do with marijuana, so as a temporary holding place, they put it in Schedule 1, which is the same as heroin, high abuse potential and no medical benefit. And it wasn't meant to stay there. They created a Schaefer Commission to investigate it. Schaefer's commission said it should be basically a Schedule 2 or 3 or even unscheduled. Unscheduled products would be like Tylenol. And the president at the time was Nixon, and he rejected the findings. So that's why marijuana stayed in Schedule 1. It has nothing to do with the product, with the characteristics of the drug. And I think to this day that if Bill Clinton was president in 69, we wouldn't have this issue now, because it would have been legalized back then. So, if you realize that the product right now, marijuana, if it was reclassified, marijuana would be at worst a Schedule 3, and a product that would be a Schedule 1, which is of no medical benefit, is addictive, and causes death, is tobacco. So that is currently legal, but it should be a Schedule 1 drug.
Interesting. I wanted to just reiterate for our viewers that we can get you copies of the articles from the quarterly that both Jeff and Ann wrote. And a few people asked me about the speaker at the support group over the weekend, who is a medical marijuana coach, and I will post that on this Facebook page. Do you all have just time for maybe 1 or 2 more quick questions? Okay. Is there a certain strain that makes you more like hungry and paranoid and you should avoid it? Or is that just really a personal type of a thing?
It's not necessarily the strain, it's the other products that are in it, the terpenes and the flavonoids that are in it. The main thing of the strains, as you hit on before, is, the indica makes you, more sleepy. The sativa makes you more energetic and thoughtful. But even with the indica, that effect of making you sleepy works for about 80 to 90% of people. But 10, 15% of people are going to have the opposite effect with the indica.
Yeah.
So you have to, find out what works for you. So that's the strains. Then you got to look at all the other stuff. And like I said, I go for the one really tends to knock me out. So I've got the melatonin added in, I've got the flavonoids and terpenes that are all set to make you sleep. And that was based on the recommendation of the pharmacist. And so, I love it.
Yeah, every dispensary, every state has different names and different products. So it's really hard to say this one is the
Right.
one to try. But the staff at the dispensaries are so helpful. So if you just work with the pharmacist or the bud tenders or even the people at the front desk who take your card and let you in because they rotate into the back and become bud tenders, they can all help you. And
Yeah.
it,
That
unfortunately, there are no samples. You have to buy a
Right.
full rate of it.
no free samples. The speaker also mentioned what you were just talking about, Jeff, is, I know like my father or my sister, they would take something like a Benadryl or a Sudafed, something that would knock out most everyone, and it would hype them up. So there is a small percentage of people who are going to have a
Right.
very different reaction than what most people have. So again, you kind of need to just,
And again, speaking of the Pennsylvania experience, when I went into the dispensary the first time, they sit you down and, while you're waiting to talk to the pharmacist, and they have you look through this brochure, a loose leaf binder of the different products so you can become familiar with the one you want. Well, the loose leaf binder, no kidding, was this thick. There was probably 200 pages in there. There's no way that any of us could become familiar with the products that were in there. And that's why you have to rely on the experts who are there. They know all the different products and their advantages and disadvantages.
it would almost be nice to have someone come with you who's done it before, because it does seem a little intimidating. It's definitely sort of out of the comfort zone of a lot of people. And so maybe you can find someone else who's been there, even if it's for a different reason.
Yeah. Well,
With you.
you're not allowed, you're only allowed to go in the dispensary if you have a medical marijuana card.
Right.
So
Or
like
if you're
But
a
if you have a
caregiver.
friend, if you know
or if
someone else,
you're a certified care in New Jersey, you have to be
right.
a certified
But if you
caregiver.
know someone who does and they've already been, and they can maybe come with you, because it does seem, like I said, I think it does seem a little bit maybe intimidating at
It's
first.
very daunting at the beginning. You just,
Yeah.
it's all trial and error. And like I'm sitting there saying, am I going to tell this guy that I don't know how to vape?
Yeah.
But if you want to know how, you got to
Yeah.
speak up.
Right.
So
Right.
he
Yeah.
laughed a lot and then he showed me. So
Is there anything you want to leave everyone with? Any final thoughts on the matter, or for now?
Well, I mean, if you want to post my email address, if somebody has, generic questions, or they want to look at the quarterly, because a lot of what we talked about is in there, and that's a good jumping off point for information.
yeah, and people can find the quarterly by themselves. It's on our website.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you look under resources, I think it's under.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And back
I
issues,
believe
they're
it's
from spring of
spring and
Well, they
2018.
can
summer.
email me, and they can
Yeah.
email me. We'll make sure. And Amy actually made a comment on here, which I think is a really good comment, is not all dispensaries are the same. There are
Right.
good ones and not as good ones.
Right. Even
Right.
from state to
Helpful
state.
and not as
Once you get a
Right.
card in the state, you can go anywhere in the state, but you can't switch dispensaries at will. You have to actually have your case moved to a different dispensary in New Jersey. So I can't
So
like go
definitely
shop
some
around.
red tape, it sounds like.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
Right.
And again,
And
it's daunting, but it's doable. And
and
my final words would be it's worth a try. You've probably done a million other things that make less, I did that anyway, that made less sense than marijuana to try and get rid of the pain, because nobody wants to be in pain. So you have to find what works for you. And this is, like I said, one more tool. And I am available. You can even post my phone number, the cell phone number, if people want to call and chat about it, or email or text. I'm a bad texter though, so I'm better off with um, email or phone. But I'm happy to talk to anybody at any time about my
Awesome.
experience.
yeah, and likewise, that's why I said you can post my email address, and I'd be happy to talk to people about that. And you know, my final points would be just it is not a product for everybody, because there is no one thing for everybody. Not everybody should get an MVD. Not everybody should get a rhizotomy. Not everybody should get Tegretol. It is an individualized thing, and people, I would suggest is they just keep their mind open to, you know, having it available in their toolbox. I know Ann said another weapon, but I'd look at it
I know
Pick your,
I said that.
pick your analogy.
Tool in your
Um,
toolbox.
as a
and for all, for
toolbox.
For those of you who are leaving messages for Jeff and for Ann, they will get to see these afterwards. So they will, if I know Jeff and I know Ann, they will probably reach back out to you. So thank you for sending them your messages and additional questions. They'll try to get to you. You can always email me at afeldman@tna-support.org, or you can email the info email. And thank you, Ann.
And thank you for having us do this. This was really very nice for us too.
It was great. It was good to see you like this. Thank you, Jeff. I'm so sorry that today was rough.
Yeah, of all days, right?
Of all days.
I didn't want to take my marijuana. Normally I would have, but I didn't want to be falling asleep an hour ago on you. So
well, we know what you're doing right. We know what you're going to do right now.
We know, right.
After this, the water is getting filled up, and I'm gonna go to bed in a half an hour.
All right, that sounds good. I hope you feel better, and thank you for doing this. And I appreciate all you guys do on this matter for the facial pain community. I think it is super important to be, you know, open about it and to be very forthright about it and to address it just like we would with any other treatment. So I really appreciate you guys doing that. And I hope everybody has a good night and stay safe, stay healthy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.